Picture this. You are a condemned prisoner in ancient Persia. Two small wooden boats are brought before you. At first, you might think they signal a quick, merciful death, perhaps drowning. But the truth is far darker. These boats are not vessels for water. They are your coffin, your torture chamber, and your slow tomb. You will be confined between them, force-fed milk and honey, until your body becomes a living feast for insects. Days stretch into weeks, each one a testament to human cruelty and the horrifying creativity of absolute power. Execution in these dark corners of history was never just about ending a life. It was a demonstration of dominance, a psychological spectacle designed to terrify. Monarchs did not merely execute, they orchestrated displays of suffering that rivaled the most twisted imagination, turning death into both a weapon and a message. Take Vlad the Impaler, the infamous ruler of Wallachia. His method of impalement was far more than a simple act of violence. It was a meticulous science of agony. Stakes were sharpened to precise specifications. Too sharp, and death came quickly. Too blunt, and the victim's body would resist the torment. Skilled executioners, trained in anatomy perhaps more thoroughly than some physicians of the time, knew exactly where to pierce to prolong life and maximize suffering. Victims often remained conscious for hours, sometimes even days, while their bodies slowly succumbed to the stake. But Vlad's true brilliance, or perhaps his madness, was in what he did with the corpses. Arranged in geometric patterns around his castle, the impaled formed what he called his forest of the dead. Approaching visitors would confront hundreds of dying humans, their screams a symphony of horror, announcing the prince's power long before armies or banners did. Fear, Vlad understood, was far more potent than steel. Enemy soldiers surrendered rather than risk this fate, and his own subjects dared not dream of rebellion. Far to the east, Emperor Lingchi of China elevated execution to a perverse art form. The method known as death by 1,000 cuts was not a frenzy of slashing, but a calculated, agonizing process. The condemned would be tied to a wooden frame in public squares, their bodies mapped like butcher diagrams. Cuts were numbered, meticulously planned, beginning at the fingertips, carefully avoiding major blood vessels to prolong awareness. Opium might be administered, not as mercy, but to ensure consciousness, so the victim could experience each incremental mutilation. Even the audience played a role. Nobles would place wagers on how long the condemned would survive, turning human dismantling into an entertainment spectacle. Every detail, from precision cuts to public involvement, reinforced the emperor's authority through shared horror. Then there was Empress Wu Zetian, China's only female emperor, whose cruelty carried a distinctly psychological edge. Her signature method, known as human swine, was almost too horrifying to record in detail. Victims would have limbs amputated, eyes gouged, tongues removed before being discarded into latrines. But Wu Zetian's genius lay not only in torture itself, but in her use of witnesses. Families, including children, were forced to watch the gruesome fate of their loved ones. The Empress understood a terrifying truth. Physical pain is temporary, but trauma passed down through generations could enforce obedience long after the executioner's work was done. Diplomatic visitors reported rooms adorned with preserved body parts of previous offenders, a macabre warning that fear could shape entire social and political landscapes. Across these examples, a pattern emerges. Absolute power corrupts, amplifying cruelty into art. Executions were not merely punishments, they were tools of psychological warfare. The rulers we examine here were masters of terror, blending calculation, imagination, and perverse showmanship to bend populations to their will. These were not just deaths, they were lessons written in human suffering, and societies learned them quickly.
As the centuries unfolded, the art of execution evolved from isolated displays of cruelty into a systematic instrument of social control. The Spanish Inquisition, under Tomás de Torquemada, perfected this chilling concept. Executions were no longer merely private punishments, they became public spectacles, carefully staged as religious theater. Weeks before the actual death, condemned heretics underwent what was called spiritual preparation, coerced confessions, detailed denunciations of neighbors, renunciations of beliefs. Those who resisted faced tortures designed to make even the most familiar devices seem merciful by comparison. The garusha, for instance, suspended victims by wrists tied behind their backs and dropped them repeatedly until their shoulders dislocated, all while trained executioners maintained consciousness just long enough to maximize agony. Public ceremonies were a theater of terror. Families were forced to witness loved ones paraded through streets in humiliating attire, children watching their parents' humiliation firsthand. Burnings at the stake were choreographed to prolong suffering. Green wood produced thick, choking smoke, while flames were controlled to extend the victim's agony. The audience, compelled to attend and respond with zeal, became unwitting participants, ensuring that fear radiated through entire communities. Torquemada understood a terrifying principle. The true power of creative brutality was not in the death itself, but in the collective trauma it could instill. Across the Ottoman Empire, Sultan Mehmed IV harnessed execution as both domestic control and diplomatic weapon. His infamous 1,000 deaths subjected prisoners to different forms of torture daily for months, while court physicians ensured survival to prolong suffering. He documented these methods in elaborate illustrated manuscripts, sending them as diplomatic gifts to Europe. Imagine receiving such a detailed record of human torment, each illustration a warning, each page a psychological weapon. Entire armies learned of Mehmed's cruelty and surrendered preemptively, proving that terror alone could wield power beyond the battlefield. Children were sometimes forced to participate in the torment of their parents, ensuring trauma propagated through generations. In Mehmed's calculus, survivors became messengers of fear, their stories more potent than official proclamations. Meanwhile, in Japan, the shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu refined execution into a tool for cultural and philosophical domination. His sushi, or hanging torture, was not designed merely to kill, but to dismantle the very foundations of resistance. Victims were suspended upside down over pits of filth, small incisions in the temples, allowing blood to drip slowly. Days or weeks passed as the condemned were left in this disorienting agony, their minds fracturing under relentless pressure. Buddhist monks were forced to witness these executions and later preach about them in temples, turning spiritual authority into a mechanism of fear. Scholars were compelled to publicly renounce their teachings, their ideas declared misguided before entire communities. The combination of physical torment and intellectual humiliation created a society in which rebellion or independent thought became almost unthinkable. From Vlad's Forests of the Dying, to Wu Zetian's Human Swine, to Torquemada's religious theater, Mehmed IV's illustrated tortures, and Tokugawa's cultural manipulation, a pattern emerges. These were not mere executions, they were campaigns of psychological warfare. Entire civilizations were shaped by fear, obedience enforced not only by law, but through generations of trauma. And yet, the final lesson is not confined to history. As we live in a world of surveillance states and subtle psychological control, one must ask, how different are we today? The tools have changed, but the fundamental equation remains: power plus creativity equals control through fear. The chilling realization lingers. Entire societies can be bent to submission, not only by armies or laws, but by the deliberate, calculated orchestration of suffering, whether overt or unseen. The victims are not always those who perish, but those whose lives and minds are molded to accept cruelty as inevitable, shaping the culture itself.